My coffee cup nearly shattered as it hit the floor when I saw my flowchart on the massive screen. The operations director stood proudly beneath it, basking in thunderous applause. "My system saves millions," he announced, gesturing to MY work, 2 years of MY life, while I remained frozen at the back of the conference hall, trembling with shock and rage. The worst part? I hadn't even been invited to this meeting. I was only here because I'd stayed late fixing a database query when the corporate-wide email announced an exciting innovation showcase. My name appeared nowhere on the slides, not even in the footnotes. Mark Reynolds, our operations director, beamed with pride. "Using predictive analytics and real-time tracking, we've optimized our supply chain to cut operational costs by 38%. My predictive analytics. My tracking algorithms. My late nights and missed weekends." From the back row, I watched the executive team nodding approvingly. The CEO herself stood up to congratulate him. "Mark, this is exactly the kind of innovative thinking that sets this company apart. I'm impressed you developed this system while managing your department." He smiled modestly, as if embarrassed by the praise. "Well, I've been working on this concept for some time. Sometimes leadership means seeing possibilities others miss." My fingers tightened around my phone where I still had the congratulatory message my direct supervisor had sent me yesterday. "Rachel, your logistics system is brilliant. Mark wants to see it tomorrow. This could be your breakthrough moment." I'd been ecstatic. After fighting for 2 years to get anyone to listen to my ideas about optimizing our crumbling logistics system, finally someone was paying attention. I never imagined paying attention meant stealing it outright. My mentor, David Chin, sat in the third row. He caught my eye and quickly looked away. He knew. Of course he knew. As director of analytics, he'd reviewed my project multiple times. Now he was nodding along, complicit in the theft. The projector switched to another slide, my implementation timeline, with Mark's name where mine should be. Something snapped inside me. I set down my coffee cup, pulled out my laptop, and walked swiftly to an empty conference room across the hall. My hands were surprisingly steady as I logged into the company network. In 3 minutes, I'd accessed the presentation server and downloaded a copy of Mark's slides. Then I opened my secure cloud storage and began downloading every version of my project, from initial concept to final implementation plan. Every document with my name, timestamps, and revision history. Every email where I'd proposed these exact solutions only to be told they were interesting, but not a priority. As I worked, I remembered the embedded authentication protocol I'd built into my system. Something I'd added after watching another colleague's work get appropriated last year. It was my insurance policy, requiring a specific sequence of commands that only I knew to fully activate all features. Without it, the system would run at reduced efficiency, never reaching the promised 38% improvement. The conference room door opened, and I looked up to find Miguel from IT standing there, his expression concerned. "I saw you leave the presentation," he said quietly. "That was your system, wasn't it?" I nodded stiffly. "I maintain the server logs, Rachel. I know who built that system. The testing environments don't lie." He closed the door and sat down. "What are you going to do?" I stared at my screen, at the evidence compiling into a neat, irrefutable package. "I haven't decided yet." Miguel slid a flash drive across the table. "Server access logs for the past 6 months, showing exactly who worked on what and when. Just in case you need it." Our eyes met in silent understanding. This wasn't the first time innovation had been stolen at Global Shipping Solutions, but I was determined it would be the last time it happened to me. "Thank you," I whispered, taking the drive. As the applause from the main conference room reached its crescendo, I felt something shift inside me. The meek analyst who avoided conflict was gone. I had the evidence. I had the back door to my own system. And now I had a decision to make. 3 days passed since Mark stole my system and received accolades for it. 3 days of smiling, nodding, and pretending everything was fine while I meticulously built my case. Rachel, I need those quarterly projections for the Pacific routes by end of day, Mark said, barely glancing at me as he passed my desk. Since his presentation triumph, he'd been appointed to lead the implementation of his system. The implementation I had already planned out in exquisite detail. Of course, I replied neutrally. Will you also need the algorithms adjusted for the seasonal variance? He paused, confusion briefly flickering across his face. Just follow the standard protocol. There isn't a standard protocol for this system yet, I pointed out. Since it's new. Mark's eyes narrowed slightly. Then use your best judgment. That's what I pay you for. You pay me to create innovations you can steal? I thought, but I just nodded. As he walked away, I turned back to my computer and continued working on 2 projects simultaneously, the implementation he'd demanded and my own insurance policy. I'd spent every evening combing through the company archives and my personal records, building a timeline that proved beyond doubt my authorship of the logistics optimization system. Miguel from IT had been invaluable, providing server timestamps and access logs that showed my consistent work on the project over 2 years. But I needed more. Something undeniable. Something that would force acknowledgement. At lunch, I sat alone in the courtyard, reviewing my visa documentation. My H-1B was sponsored by Global Shipping Solutions, and if I lost this job, I'd have just 60 days to find another sponsor or leave the country. I couldn't risk direct confrontation without absolute certainty I'd win. A shadow fell across my table, and I looked up to see David, my mentor, standing awkwardly with his salad. Mind if I join you? He asked. I gestured to the empty chair, keeping my expression neutral. For several minutes, we ate in uncomfortable silence. Finally, he spoke. You're upset about Mark's presentation. I met his eyes steadily. You knew that was my system. He sighed, setting down his fork. It's complicated, Rachel. Mark has been pushing for operations to lead innovation initiatives for months. When he saw your system, he recognized it could be his winning move. So he stole it. David winced. In corporate terms, he leveraged available resources. Your project was developed on company time, using company resources. That doesn't mean he can claim personal credit for work he didn't do. Look, I know it feels unfair. It doesn't feel unfair, David. It is unfair. And illegal. It's intellectual property theft. He glanced around nervously. Keep your voice down. This is how corporate America works sometimes. Mark has influence with the board. He could make VP next year if this implementation goes well. And what do I get? You'll be recognized within the department. Maybe a bonus at year end. I laughed bitterly. While he builds his career on my work. David leaned forward. Rachel, you're brilliant, but you're not politically savvy. Mark can help your career if you play along. Fight him, and you're risking everything, including your visa status. My stomach clenched. So they'd use that against me too. I believed in this company, I said quietly. I believed in you as a mentor. He had the decency to look ashamed. I'm trying to help you navigate this. Sometimes you have to let things go to move forward. I gathered my things and stood. I'll keep that in mind. As I walked away, I made my decision. I wouldn't let this go, but I would move forward, just not in the way David expected. That night, I activated the authentication protocol hidden deep in my system's architecture. It wouldn't disable the system, but without the proper authorization sequence, which only I knew, certain optimizations would gradually degrade. Not enough to be immediately noticeable, but enough that in 3 weeks, when they presented to the board, the promised results wouldn't materialize. They'd need me then. And I'd be ready. What do you mean the system's only showing 22% improvement? Your slides promise 38%. Mark's voice carried through the glass walls of the conference room where the implementation team was meeting. I kept my head down, focusing on my monitor, but I was listening intently. It had been 18 days since Mark claimed my system as his own, and exactly as I'd predicted, the unauthorized version was showing diminishing returns. The project manager stuttered through an explanation about unexpected variables, and system integration challenges. I could have told them exactly what was wrong. In fact, I had documented the potential issues and their solutions in my original design documents, the ones Mark had apparently never fully read before claiming my work. My phone vibrated with a message from Miguel. Mark's requesting all access logs to the system core. Stalling, but can't hold him off long. I replied, "Thanks for the heads up." Proceeding to Phase 2. Phase 2 was risky. I'd been building to this moment methodically, gathering evidence and creating backups. Now I needed to escalate without exposing myself too soon. I drafted an email to Sarah Jenkins, our financial director, who I knew had been skeptical about Mark's sudden expertise in logistics optimization. Subject: Logistics System Performance Analysis, Ms. Jenkins. I've been tracking the implementation of the new logistics system and have identified specific issues causing the performance shortfall. I've taken the liberty of preparing an analysis with potential solutions. Given your interest in the project's financial implications, would you have time for a brief meeting? Respectfully, Rachel Garcia, Senior Business Analyst. I reread it twice before sending. This wasn't a direct accusation, just a professional offering assistance. But it would get me into a room with someone who could actually help. Within 10 minutes, Sarah's response arrived, available at 3 p.m. today. Bring your analysis and full documentation. At 2:45, I gathered my materials. Printed copies of my original designs with timestamps, server logs from Miguel showing my work pattern, emails between Mark and me where he requested information about my interesting logistics ideas, and most crucially, a flash drive containing the authentication sequence that would fully unlock the system's capabilities. As I approached Sarah's office, I heard raised voices inside. Through the partially open door, I saw Mark standing over her desk, his face flushed with anger. "This system is functioning exactly as designed," he insisted. The projections were theoretical maximums. I never guaranteed 38% in the initial phase. Sarah looked unimpressed. "That's not what you told the executive team, Mark. The CEO approved additional resourcing based on those numbers. The board presentation is in 4 days, and we're nowhere near target. We just need more time to optimize. We don't have more time. This was your initiative, your system. If it fails, that's on you." I cleared my throat and both turned to look at me. Sarah straightened. "Rachel, come in. Mark and I were just discussing the logistics system." Mark's expression darkened. "This is a director-level meeting, Garcia. We can reschedule your time." Actually, Sarah interjected, "Rachel's analysis might be exactly what we need right now. She's been tracking the implementation issues." I stepped into the office, pulse racing but outwardly calm. "I believe I can help resolve the performance issues with the system." Mark scoffed. "The system is fine. It's the implementation team that's lacking. The system is running at reduced capacity because it hasn't been properly authenticated," I stated flatly. "It's a security feature built into the architecture." Sarah's eyebrows rose. "What authentication?" "This wasn't in any of the documentation." "It was in my original documentation," I replied, sliding a folder across her desk. Page 42, Security Protocols section. "The system requires a specific authentication sequence from the primary architect to enable full functionality." Mark grabbed the folder before Sarah could open it. "What are you talking about?" "I designed this system. There's no authentication requirement." I met his gaze steadily. "Every version of my logistics optimization system, from initial concept to final implementation, included this security protocol. It's a standard practice for protecting intellectual property." The room went silent. I had just laid my cards on the table, using the phrase intellectual property very deliberately. Sarah looked between us, understanding dawning on her face. "Your system?" "I was under the impression Mark developed this." "That was also my impression," I said calmly, until I saw my work presented as his at the Innovation Showcase. Mark's face flushed. "This is absurd. Garcia is one of many analysts who contributed data to my project. Now she's trying to claim credit because the implementation team is struggling. I removed a flash drive from my pocket and placed it on the desk. This contains every version of the system I developed over the past 2 years, with metadata and timestamps intact. It also contains the server logs showing exactly who accessed which files and when. And finally, it contains the authentication sequence that will bring the system to full functionality. Sarah stared at the drive, then back at me. These are serious implications, Rachel. I'm aware. That's why I've documented everything meticulously. I placed another folder on her desk. This includes emails where I proposed this exact system to department heads, including Mark, and was repeatedly told it wasn't a priority. Until suddenly, it was just not as my innovation. Mark slammed his hand on the desk. This is corporate sabotage. She deliberately crippled a critical system to settle a personal score. I protected my intellectual property with standard security measures. I corrected. The system functions at baseline levels without authentication, enough to demonstrate value, but not enough to achieve optimal performance. This is standard practice in software development. Sarah took a deep breath. I need to review these materials. Both of you wait outside. In the hallway, Mark cornered me, keeping his voice low but intense. You're making a massive mistake, Garcia. Even if you convince Sarah, do you think the executive team will admit they celebrated the wrong person? They'll bury this and you along with it. I maintained eye contact. Perhaps. But the system won't work properly without my authentication. And the board presentation is in 4 days. You're risking your job and your visa over professional jealousy. No, I'm standing up for what's right. There's a difference. His phone buzzed. After checking it, his expression shifted from anger to calculation. The CEO wants updates on the system performance issue. Now. Then you should probably go explain why you can't deliver what you promised, I suggested. He grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. Fix the system. Now. I'll make sure you get credit internally. I removed his hand from my arm. Too late. I already have the evidence that proves my case. If the company chooses to ignore it, I have options. What options? No one will hire you after I'm done. I smiled slightly. Did you know our biggest competitor has been struggling with the same logistics challenges? I wonder what they'd think about a system that delivers 38% improvement. His face paled. You wouldn't. I don't want to. I wanted recognition from this company, which I've given 2 years of my life to, but you've left me with limited choices. Sarah's door opened. Both of you come back in. She had my flash drive connected to her computer and several documents spread across her desk. Her expression was grave. Rachel, can you authenticate the system now and demonstrate the improved functionality? I nodded. Mark, based on the evidence I've reviewed, it appears Rachel is indeed the primary architect of the system. The documentation is comprehensive and predates your involvement by nearly 2 years. He began to protest, but she held up her hand. I've already called Diane in legal and James from HR. This situation requires immediate attention, particularly with the board presentation approaching. She turned to me. Rachel, I need you to unlock the system fully. We can address the attribution issue, but we cannot present a failing system to the board. I hesitated. I need assurances that my contribution will be properly recognized. You have my word we'll resolve this fairly. But right now, the company needs your expertise. I glanced at Mark, whose face had settled into a mask of barely controlled fury, then back at Sarah. I'll authenticate the system immediately. The next morning, an all-staff email announced a clarification regarding the logistics optimization system, crediting me as the lead developer and Mark as the executive sponsor. I was named project lead for the implementation phase with immediate effect. As I walked into the office, I noticed the changed atmosphere. Some colleagues avoided eye contact, uncomfortable with the corporate drama. Others gave me subtle nods of respect or approving smiles. Word had spread about what happened. David cornered me by the coffee machine. I underestimated you, he said quietly. Yes, you did. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you. I stirred my coffee slowly. You chose political expediency over doing what's right. That's something you'll have to live with. He winced. Will you be reassigned from my team? No. But our mentor-mentee relationship is over. From now on, we're just colleagues. As I walked to my desk, I found Miguel waiting with a small box. What's this? I asked. He grinned. Your new business cards. They rush-ordered them. He handed me one, and beneath my name was a new title, Director of Logistics Innovation. That was fast, I murmured, surprised. Damage control, Miguel explained quietly. Legal advised them to make things right quickly. Plus, the system is performing exactly as you promised now that it's properly authenticated. The preliminary numbers are actually exceeding projections. I smiled slightly. Where's Mark this morning? Business trip. Word is he's being transferred to the Cleveland office. Miguel's grin widened. Regional operational support. A demotion disguised as a lateral move. Corporate politics at its finest. My computer pinged with a new meeting invitation. Board presentation prep. Logistics optimization system. The note read, Rachel, please prepare to present your system to the board on Friday. Sarah Jenkins, CFO, my system. Finally, as I settled at my desk, I opened my secure cloud storage and began organizing my presentation materials. The system I designed was revolutionary for our industry, and now I would get to showcase it properly. But more importantly, I'd learned something vital about corporate America and about myself. In this world, innovation alone isn't enough. You have to protect what you create and be willing to fight for recognition. The path of least resistance, staying quiet, and hoping someone notices your brilliance, rarely leads to success. I thought about others like me, talented professionals whose contributions go unrecognized or are outright stolen. The system I designed included protection mechanisms, but I realized we needed protection systems in our careers too, documentation, allies, and the courage to speak up. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. CEO wants to meet you before the board presentation. Impressed with system performance. Talk strategy at 2 p.m. I smiled as I replied affirmatively. The authentication protocol that had protected my intellectual property had done more than secure my system. It had secured my future. For days later, I stood confidently before the board of directors, presenting the logistics optimization system I had created. As I explained the intricate details of how it worked and demonstrated the remarkable results, I noticed something had changed. I wasn't the same person who had stood silently at the back of the conference room watching someone else take credit for my work. I had become something more, not just an innovator, but a protector of innovation itself. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have confronted the theft immediately or taken the strategic approach I did? Was I right to build in the authentication protocol, or should I have trusted the company to do the right thing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.